Hi, and welcome to this episode of HR and Cocktails. Today, I am joined by Amber Trail of Elite HR Connections, and we're going to be talking about the role of feedback in creating a positive culture. So welcome, Amber.
Thanks so much for having me.
Tell me a little bit about you and your role at Elite HR Connections.
So I've been in human resources for a little over 15 years, which sounds crazy. But I joined Elite HR Connections, and it is just a true passion of mine because it is a community for HR professionals. And you know how we go to conferences and we network, and then it's like, that's it. Well, at Elite HR Connections, we have a whole virtual community where you can connect, keep that connection going after. So it's, HR discussion groups where you can feel free to ask questions. We have constant, workshops that we can attend that just help us grow, not just professionally, but also personally.
Yes, absolutely. And it is a great network. I've had the opportunity to participate in it and participate in some of the workshops, and it is just really good. I mean, there are other ways that you can engage in the HR community, but I have found that Elite HR Connections provides a different type of connection, with a focus on development, with a focus on making sure that people are actually connected. So that is awesome.
Yes.
So today we're going to talk about feedback. And, I think when I hear feedback, when someone says, hey, I want to give you some feedback, it kind of has a negative connotation, right?
Right.
But it doesn't have to.
Right.
So from your perspective, when you think of feedback, particularly in the workplace, what does that mean for you?
For me, originally, it was the negative, like, oh no, I did something wrong. But now it's really a way of, okay, this is a way I can grow. This is how I can develop on a skill that I may not be very strong at. But it's even if you're strong at something, just knowing, hey, you could go in this direction, or let's try this out. So feedback has a really good meaning for me because it's a way I can improve as a person.
And I absolutely agree. I have a 14-year-old daughter, so, everyone, please, thank you. I accept all good wishes. But, for some people, it's hard to receive feedback. So, like, when I talk to my daughter, I'm like, hey, I'm giving you this information because I want you to be better.
Right.
And it's better coming from me, someone who genuinely cares about you and wants you to grow. Because if you don't get feedback from people who have a genuine interest in your growth, then sometimes it's a different kind of feedback, which we'll talk about later, right? So yes, and so if we go into it with the thought that it's going to be to help someone, and if I go into the conversation with the thought of, Amber wants to help me grow, I think that that's good. But I think that it also relies on a couple of things. A, we have to have a relationship.
Yes.
Of some sort.
Right.
For me to be able to receive that. So what would you say for a manager or even a colleague? Because feedback can come from anywhere, right? It doesn't always have to be top down, right? So what would you say to individuals that are considering giving feedback or as they go into a feedback conversation about the level of relationship that's necessary?
I think regardless of the level of relationship, I mean, it is hard to get feedback, especially if it's, ways you need to improve regardless. But if it's coming from a place of, a personal, I care about you, whether it's family or a manager or a coworker, I think the person receiving the feedback has to be very receptive to that and very open to receiving it. So if it's a family member, you kind of sometimes brush it off your shoulder like, okay. But it is good to know that. I'd rather, a family member tell me something I need to improve on than hearing it from a manager. But if a manager or a coworker says, look, this is something that I think you could improve on, or this is something you're doing great at, I think it is a place, it's how it's presented, but it's a place of good intent.
Yes. And so how would you recommend someone approach a feedback conversation to set the expectation or to set the table around this is what my intentions are going into this conversation? Or do you think that's necessary?
I think it is. And I think you always have to start it with, this is what you did really, really well. And you want to start it strong because you don't want to go right into this is what you need to improve on, because it might set the focus of the individual receiving the feedback as like, that's all they can focus on then. They didn't hear anything you said about the good and positive feedback. They're just now focused on, okay, I need to improve on this. This is what I have to do. They don't like this, but it's not necessarily they don't like it. But sometimes it also depends on the person, because if they are good at receiving feedback, they'll get all of it. They'll listen to all of it. If they are one who's like, I don't like criticism, I don't like to hear, regardless of how it's presented, that person, you may have to have a little more empathy when you go into that conversation. I think going into it, just like, here's the positives. And then, okay, here's what we can improve on. This is why I want to see you improve. I know you can do it.
Yeah, and I agree. And there are definitely people who have a difficult time receiving feedback. But what are the benefits of having a work environment where people can give and receive feedback? What are the benefits of that?
Number one, it creates a positive culture. I think if you can receive the feedback or give the feedback, then you are creating room for improvement. So it's less room for error. You know, you're able to go ahead and improve on something that you may not be very strong at. So it gives you that opportunity to be even better. And I feel like that really does create a more positive culture where you can go into it knowing like, hey, my employer or my manager is not going to let me mess up. And if I do, they're just going to let me know, here's how we can fix it. Having that supportive role, it really does help, and it makes work enjoyable.
So before we get into how we actually do that, I think we need to get a cocktail.
I agree.
Yes. So what cocktail would you like?
Let's do an orange crush.
An orange crush. Orange crush coming right up. Today you chose an orange crush. Why'd you choose an orange crush?
Because an orange crush is the perfect sign for Maryland.
Yes, it is. And I heard that it originated in Ocean City. That's what I heard. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I heard.
We'll go with it.
Yes, we will. So you can make an orange crush a variety of ways. Some people just use orange vodka. Some people use just plain. I split half and half. So we're going to use some orange vodka. We're going to put 2 parts of orange vodka into each glass, and you'll get to do the fun part, which is stir. I don't know, I feel like 2 might feel big, but we'll see. All right, we'll do 2 parts of the orange vodka, and then we will do 2 parts of the regular vodka. And again, you can do this any way you want to. It's up to you. It's completely up to you if you want to have just the plain vodka or if you want to do orange. I like it because it adds a little bit of extra flavor, makes it a little bit sweeter. So there's that part. And then we're going to get to the triple sec. Now, for the triple sec, which is an orange liqueur, you can do any type of triple sec if you want to. I like to do a Cointreau because Cointreau to me is a little bit smoother, a little bit, sweeter. Just 1 part of that in each one adds a little bit of sweetness to it. And I know this looks like a lot in here, but we had ice in it already, so don't judge us. All right, and we're gonna put orange juice in here. And I just eyeball my orange juice and make a mess at the same time.
That's gorgeous.
Yeah, so I just do that. And then we're gonna top it off with some Sprite, give it a little bit of fizz. Yay. And then we're gonna put a little bit more ice in there if you wanna do that, just a little bit. And then we're gonna garnish it with an orange. So I have to tell you all, no problem, we'll just pick that up. I have to tell you all, my oranges look like grapefruits or blood oranges, but we're gonna work with it. All right, I'm not sure why. It looks like an orange on the outside, but it looks like
It's just colorful.
yeah, it's just a very colorful orange. So we're just gonna garnish it and make it look all pretty and get it down in here and make it look pretty.
You can drink this in the summer, but I think it's a year-round drink.
I think so too. So
Ooh, cheers.
Awesome. All right, Amber, cheers.
Cheers.
All right, our orange crushes with the maybe grapefruit blood orange in it. Okay, so we were talking about feedback, creating a positive culture. So I guess the first thing before we kind of dive into how do we use feedback to do that, what is a company culture? What is culture?
It sets the tone for the employer and the organization. So it could mean so many different things. Whether you're doing talent acquisition, you want to retain and attract the best talent. But if they find out your culture is not that great, what's the benefit of working there? So I really think the culture, it sets the foundation for an organization or the employer. And most of us want to work for a positive culture. And we do that by knowing that the current employees are happy. What are they doing? And feedback is one of them. If you're getting constant feedback, I think it does set the tone for a better culture.
Yeah, I agree. And, when I think about the culture of an organization, I really think about the personality of the organization because an employer can say, we have a positive culture. Here are our core values, but that's on paper. The culture is the actual feeling and personality of being in that organization, right? And so I think that it's important for business owners, leaders, executives to understand you cannot define your culture by words. It is by action. It is the way people feel. And to your point, having a positive culture is where people want to be. And every organization cannot use money to attract and retain.
Exactly.
I mean, small businesses, we're a small business, you're a small business. And so we have to rely on the culture of the organization, and some of the things that when I think about a culture, it's like an entrepreneurial culture, a culture of learning, a culture of feedback, right? Where people feel comfortable giving and receiving feedback.
Right.
So there are different types of feedback, right? There's constructive feedback, and then there's destructive feedback.
Yes.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about constructive feedback. What does that look like?
Constructive feedback to me is a way of finding out something you can improve on. So, you may not be, I don't consider anyone really an expert. We all are willing, we all can learn something new every day. But I think finding ways that we may not have our, I don't necessarily like the word weakness, but some area we're not strong in. If we receive constructive feedback, we can improve on that. And maybe that could become one of our strengths.
Yeah, I call it an area of opportunity.
I love it.
Yeah. So whenever I have a conversation with a client, I'm like, no, it's not wrong. It's just an area of opportunity.
I love that.
So when we are helping people find their areas of opportunities and fill in some of those gaps, I also sometimes call it a gap analysis. So when we're helping them fill that in, giving them constructive feedback, which is, to your point, this is really what you're good at. And here are some areas of opportunity where if you can just fill those things in, I think that it would just take us to the next level, right? But I think also that when we think about feedback, it can't just be, you need to do this better. There needs to be some actionable steps that you give this person or work with them collaboratively to identify, how can I support you in getting better? And also, I think that when we think about constructive feedback, it should be given, again, with the goal of helping the person improve, not just saying you're doing something wrong. And I will also say this, many times when I hear managers talk about, I gave somebody feedback, really was just telling them what they did wrong and papering the file, which is a word in HR that we use, papering the file, meaning basically I need you to get enough documents to get somebody fired. And it's like, that's not the purpose. The purpose is really to invest in the person and help them grow. So what would you say from a constructive feedback perspective? What are some things that a manager can do? So if I have a conversation, Amber, I've noticed XYZ, what are some things that they can say? What are some ways that they can provide constructive feedback and give them actionable things to take away?
I think what you said earlier was perfect because you're asking them, how can I support you? Asking them where, how do you think that went? Or asking for their opinion first, but saying, how can I support you? Because we put a lot of time and energy into bringing someone on. We do not bring them on to see them fail. We want to see them succeed. And that constructive feedback is going to help them succeed. But opening up that conversation with, how can I support you? Or how can the organization support you? Sometimes it's just resources that they may need a little extra training in something that most of the time an organization can provide for them. But really opening it up, having a full-on conversation, never pointing the fingers, but just leaving it as an open-ended conversation that the employee can give the feedback as, this is what I think I can improve on. When you do it like that, they start to, most of the time, employees know what they're doing wrong or know that they could receive additional help or support. So when they do that, it opens it up for a really good conversation with the employer.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for constructive feedback, we're building them up, we're helping them grow,
Right.
we're giving them the tools that they need to go construct out there in the workplace.
Yes.
So then there's a different type of feedback, which is probably the feedback, I think, that when you think about the negative connotation of feedback that you may think about a little bit more, and that is destructive feedback. So when you think about feedback that's not constructive, feedback that's demotivating, talk about that a little bit and talk about the impact of that type of feedback in a culture.
The worst feedback you could give is the destructive kind. And it's really the pointing of the finger. You did this wrong. You did that wrong. And leaving no opportunity for conversation. Not, how can I support you? It's, you did that wrong. You messed up. And that's it. Not leaving the opportunity available for the employee to realize, okay, how do I fix it? You're not giving them that. And destructive feedback is awful for an internal person because it makes you feel very small. It does not make you want to work for an organization or even maybe that manager. And it makes you just feel like you did it all wrong. What are you good at if you did this wrong? Because that person will focus on just that thing you said because it never will help them grow. It belittles them.
Yeah, and when we bring it back out to the wider picture of culture, if people feel, I can't mess up, I can't make a mistake, then there starts to be the lack of transparency, throwing people under the bus, all of the trickle-down effect of what happens when I feel like I can't take accountability for something that was wrong because I'm basically just going to get ripped because of it, right? And so that's how it starts to eat away at a positive culture because I'm not going to take the fall for it. Amber did it. I'm not going to take responsibility for it. So I think that when organizations or managers or leaders are thinking about the way that they're giving feedback, it can be tough. And it really could be that someone dropped the ball and totally screwed it up. But there is a way to do that that doesn't, to your point, demoralize them and doesn't take away from the larger conversation of, hey, we're a learning organization, we're an entrepreneurial organization, we are a feedback organization. And also, I think about it as, as a leader, or for me, I see my role as a coach, so I want to help you to learn how to ride that bike until you can take the training wheels off, right? And and then when you first take the training wheels off, you're going to fall. It's going to be a bit of a mess. But I think that what managers need to do, and to your point around pointing the fingers, because Marcus Buckingham in his book, Good to Great, talks about the pointing of the fingers. I think that it's important for managers to understand that if your employee did not have the tools that they needed to do that or the guardrails in place to make sure that it didn't go all the way to the left, you own some of that too. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So with that in mind and with the thought of, the manager owning some of that, talk about how feedback should go both ways. It shouldn't just be top down. Yeah.
Managers always they are an employee, just like the employee themselves. You have to know, okay, am I doing a great job managing? If you are a great manager, you are really receptive to receiving feedback. And I think that they should be receptive to that because maybe someone's first time manager. They don't really know how to manage. They're great at what they did, but they've been moved up. and they don't know how to manage. So receiving feedback on how you can improve, how you can be the best manager is going to help them too. And I think if you are in a conversation with an employee and you're the manager giving the feedback, you should be open to the employee saying, look, I really need more of your support. This is what I could use from you. And be open to helping them with that specific situation, because you can't improve unless you know what you can improve on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also believe that managers should ask for feedback. I believe that if there's, a project that we worked on, whether it went well or whether it didn't, as a leader, I'm going to ask for feedback.
Right.
Tell me what I did well. Tell me what I could have done more of, what I need to do less of, because I don't know. And we all have our perceptions of how we show up.
Right.
And usually that's not how people see us.
Right.
So I also think it's equally as important for managers to solicit feedback, because even though you want people to feel like they can give you feedback, sometimes people don't always feel comfortable giving feedback to their leader.
No.
So if you ask, hopefully it'll open that door a little bit for them. And everyone still won't walk through that door.
Right.
But the hope is that they'll walk through the door and they will be open to giving that feedback so that you can make the adjustments too as a leader. And so the more feedback that's being given both ways, the more that people in the organization feel like they're not always holding their breath. And we've all worked for those places where we feel like we're on pins and needles, we're holding our breath, we don't want anything to happen. And the more that you can give feedback, the better. I used to work for an organization, and they had a model that was called carefrontation. And so everyone had a responsibility to carefront someone. So before you could go to their manager, whether they were up or down or a peer, before you could go to their manager or anyone else in the organization, you had to carefront that person. And so it was a great model.
I like that.
Yeah, it was a really great, this was a very large organization, very, very large organization. But it kind of put the responsibility on individuals to create that solution for themselves. And at first it's difficult to get used to, because if a VP, and let's say you're an individual contributor and a vice president, does something and you're like, I got to carefront this person.
Right.
But in that culture, it was a policy in the handbook.
Wow.
Carefrontation was a policy in the handbook, and you had an obligation to go to that person and have a conversation with that. And that person had an obligation to listen to you.
I love that.
And so that really, that made a difference in that organization's culture, for sure. So I think that, there's an opportunity to really just build it in fundamentally, even from a policy perspective, right?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about feedback, you think about let me pull you in and have a conversation with you, right? But what are some actual tools that can be used to provide feedback to individuals?
I think number one is just the setting. I know you don't really think that's a tool necessarily, but this setting, it's not a great place if you are at the water cooler and you're providing feedback to someone where everybody else can hear it. You need to provide a setting where it's a very safe space so that, feedback can go both ways. And I feel as if you just have to have that internal empathy, just knowing look, I got to give some really hard feedback to this person, but I'm going to do it in a loving, caring way, as much as you can HR possibly do it. Just making sure that it's open for constructiveness too. So if you're the manager giving that feedback, and you might have to endure some really rough feedback yourself, but just knowing that it's a way to improve. And there's always trainings out there that can really help you be the best at giving and receiving feedback. But I think just, going in with 2 ears and 1 mouth is the best thing you can do, especially you're there to listen. How can you support them?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And then there's the informal feedback, and then there's the formal feedback, right? So formal feedback could be the performance review. And a lot of organizations are going away from the annual review.
Right.
They're going into the more of the quarterly feedback conversations, et cetera. There's 360 reviews. And for those of you that may not be familiar, a 360 review is where you get feedback from, up, down, external, internal, peers, and it's really a full
circle.
feedback loop, right? A full circle of feedback that you get so that you can, quite honestly, fill in your blind spots, right?
Right.
So, when you think about the various formal types of feedback, what advice would you give to organizations as they identify, based on their culture, based on the type of culture that they're trying to get to build, what feedback would you give about how to utilize and leverage formal feedback as well?
You definitely don't wait. If there's something that, you may have, whether you have 90-day performance reviews, a year, if you're still doing that, don't wait if there's something that needs addressed now. So do check-ins. I love when employers go in and they have just informal yet formal. You're still doing a check-in. Just let's see how things are going. You don't want to wait for months and not talk with the employee, because when you do have that conversation with them, and that feedback may be harder to listen to and harder to hear, because they're like, why didn't you tell me earlier? I could have fixed this. But definitely, I love that the monthly check-ins or, biweekly check-ins, but also the more formal, you always, when you're doing documentation, I think making sure that you have professional development on there, not just your strengths and your ways that you can improve, but how can we help you improve? Are there trainings that you would like to attend? What tools do you need from us as an employer? So I think that is definitely, when you're doing more formal, it needs to have ways that they can improve. What can we provide you?
And what about the person who's performing well? Because we've kind of talked about people who need to improve. What about the person who's doing a really good job? How do we help them and give them feedback and help develop them?
I think definitely asking them if they're succession planning. Do they want to grow into a supervisor role? Do they want to grow? Where do they want to be in the organization? I had a situation one time where an employee said, I want to be, this wasn't for me, but they said to the manager, I want to be in your position. And that manager was like, good, I want you to be. Now, that could have gone the very opposite way, but that manager reacted perfectly, because we are there to see them grow. So it's really, how can I support you? And thinking of that employee that's already doing amazing, fantastic, you can't say enough. It's how do we help you grow? And if it's something that you want to be higher in the company or, go in a different direction, just being open to those different roles for that employee.
Exactly. And in this same organization that I referred to about Carefrontation, they had a philosophy that as a leader, you needed to create a legacy in the organization, meaning you needed to be able to show the people that you've promoted and moved up through the organization, whether it's to replace yourself or not. And so the only way that people can grow, fill in their gaps, fill in their areas of opportunity is for you to give them feedback and opportunities to give you feedback so that you can help them the best way possible.
Right.
So as we, close out the conversation around feedback, have you had any, experience with software, apps, things that do a really good job of helping organizations with feedback and documenting feedback?
So I know there's several different platforms you can use out there. I haven't used any specifically in a while. Most of it's been by paper. But I do know there are several softwares out there that can help you develop questions, especially around a specific employee, their personality. If you do personality tests, there's certain questions that you can ask that employee that could help them start to think, what are ways I can improve, or what am I doing really good at? But I know there's a ton out there. Most of my experience has been paper.
No, definitely. I recently came across a software called TrueVelop, and it is a real-time tool that is an app on the phone where managers can give kudos to people, track activities, and really help tell a full story that tracks it ongoing on a day-to-day basis. And I really think that there's a lot of apps that are going in that direction, gamification of feedback and allowing people to give shout outs. I've had a client that also allowed employees to give feedback to each other. So this client had what they call wooden bucks. And so everyone had the ability to give a wooden buck to someone. someone. And if you got a wooden buck, then you could go into the online store and buy something. Or we had another organization where they had spot awards, where you could go to the executive admin who had $10 gift cards. You could get a gift card, give it to that person and say, I want to give you a spot award because you did something really great. And so I think that we also can think about the fact that there is feedback that is, you really did a great job. Thank you so much. And rewarding them for that.
Right.
So I would just say, as we think about feedback, yes, it's the conversations. Yes, it's the filling in the gaps. But there's also the formal documentation of it.
Right.
And then there's also the kudos, the pat on the back, the you did a really good job, the shout outs, the ability to be able to let everyone in the organization know, hey, I just want to give Amber a shout out because she really helped me with the
Right.
huge project and I really appreciate
Right.
it. So feedback can look so many different ways. But ultimately, when it boils down to it, it is the way the feedback is given
Yes.
that's going to make the difference in the
Exactly.
organization. So is there anything that we missed or anything else that you want to share with our audience today?
I just really think that both ways, employer and employee, you just have to be open. It's a really hard thing to learn, but you just have to take a risk and just be open to receive feedback, whether it's constructive. It's a way for you to improve. So always think of it, how can I improve on this? And it's, accepting that feedback from your manager, your fellow employees, your family.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Amber, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for this episode of HR and Cocktails.